The air in the chamber of the chessboard was thick with tension, the giant stone pieces looming like ancient titans. Harry, Hermione, and Ron, 3 11-year-olds, stood before the final, most dangerous obstacle to the Philosopher's Stone. Ron, with his innate strategic brilliance, had taken command, guiding the pieces with a fierce determination. "Harry, you take the Queen's bishop. Hermione, you're the rook," Ron had ordered, his eyes fixed on the unfolding battle. He, of course, would be the knight. The game was brutal, unforgiving. Piece after piece fell, shattered by the opposing army. Then came the moment of truth. "I've got to be taken," Ron declared, his voice firm, though a tremor of fear was visible in his hands. "It's the only way to clear the path for Harry to checkmate." In the original timeline, Harry and Hermione had protested, but Ron had insisted, his bravery shining. The White Queen, a towering, menacing figure, had swung her sword, striking Ron down. But in that timeline, Ron had merely been knocked unconscious, a hero awaiting recovery. In this timeline, the blow was different. Perhaps the Queen's aim was truer, or Ron's protective magic, still nascent, faltered for a critical second. The stone blade, instead of merely incapacitating, struck with lethal force. A sickening crack echoed through the chamber, and Ron's small body crumpled, not with the gentle fall of unconsciousness, but with a final chilling stillness. Harry and Hermione watched in horror, their screams swallowed by the silence that followed. The Queen stood motionless, her victory absolute. Ron Weasley, the brave, loyal, funny, and utterly irreplaceable friend, was gone. Hermione, pale and trembling, knelt beside him, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a sob. She knew with a terrifying certainty that Ron was truly gone. The magic that had protected Harry from Quirrell's touch would not protect Ron from this. The weight of Ron's sacrifice and its devastating cost crushed Harry, who had led them here. He had been the one to face Voldemort. Ron had died for him. This guilt, a cold, sharp shard, would embed itself deep within his soul, shaping every decision, every fear, every future interaction. Despite their grief, Hermione's logical mind, even in shock, kicked in. "Harry, we have to go, for Ron. We can't let him die for nothing." Her voice was raw, but her resolve was absolute. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she pulled Harry away from Ron's body, dragging him towards the final door. Dumbledore, instead of offering platitudes, sat beside Harry's bed in the hospital wing, his gaze unwavering. "Harry," he said softly, his voice a balm on Harry's raw soul, "Ron Weasley was a hero. He made a choice, a brave and selfless choice to protect his friends and to do what was right. His death, while an unbearable tragedy, is not a mark of your failure, but a testament to his extraordinary courage and loyalty. He would not want you to carry this burden of guilt, but rather to honor his memory by living, and by fighting for the very things he died to protect." He spoke of love, loss, and the strength found in remembrance. He didn't shy away from the pain but acknowledged it, validating Harry's grief. Crucially, Dumbledore understood that Harry now carried a heavier weight. He began to confide in Harry more subtly over the coming years. He saw in Harry not just the boy who lived, but the boy who had lost, and who would need deeper guidance, a more direct understanding of the darkness he faced. The bond between them, forged in shared sorrow, became stronger, more paternal, and more urgent. Hermione, too, was shattered. She and Harry clung to each other, two survivors in a world suddenly much colder. Their friendship, stripped of Ron's mediating presence and light-hearted banter, deepened into an intense, almost symbiotic reliance. They were each other's only true confidants, sharing the silent grief and the unspoken understanding of what they had lost. The start of second year was somber. Harry and Hermione, though inseparable, were quieter, their laughter less frequent. The Weasley family was devastated. Molly Weasley, though understanding of Ron's heroism, struggled immensely with the loss of her youngest son. Fred and George, usually boisterous, were subdued, their pranks muted, their grief a raw wound. They looked at Harry with a mixture of sympathy and a lingering shadow of what might have been. When the Chamber of Secrets opened, Harry and Hermione faced it as a formidable duo. Hermione, driven by a fierce protectiveness of Harry and a desperate need to prevent further tragedy, threw herself into research with an almost obsessive intensity. Harry, haunted by Ron's death, was more reckless, more willing to put himself in danger, believing he had nothing left to lose. When Hermione was petrified, Harry's world crumbled again. The loss of his last true confidant, the one person who understood his pain, was almost unbearable. He found himself more isolated but also more determined. He remembered Ron's sacrifice, Hermione's courage, and resolved to face the monster alone if he had to. Ginny Weasley, still possessed by Tom Riddle's diary, became a symbol of his failure to protect. The fight with the basilisk was even more desperate. Harry, alone in the chamber, fought with a desperate ferocity born of grief and a profound fear of losing anyone else. Fawkes and the Sword of Gryffindor still came to his aid, but the victory felt hollow without Ron to share it with, and without Hermione to celebrate with. Upon Hermione's recovery, their bond solidified further. They were survivors, scarred but unbreakable. The seeds of a deeper affection, a love born of shared trauma and unwavering loyalty, began to sprout between them. The arrival of Sirius Black brought a new layer of complexity. Without Ron's family history to provide the initial skepticism about Sirius, Harry and Hermione were more open to the possibility of his innocence, though still cautious. Hermione's logical mind was crucial in piecing together the evidence. The confrontation in the Shrieking Shack was different. There was no Ron to be dragged by the dog, no Ron to add to the chaos. Harry and Hermione, working in tandem, were perhaps more focused, more efficient. Wormtail still managed to escape due to Harry's momentary hesitation and the sheer speed of his transformation. But the trio, now a duo, was left with a clearer understanding of the truth. Harry's emotional state was one of quiet intensity. He still felt the phantom ache of Ron's absence, but it had matured into a quiet resolve. He was less prone to impulsive outbursts, more thoughtful, a trait perhaps influenced by Hermione's constant presence and Dumbledore's subtle guidance. Voldemort's return was inevitable, but the path was altered. Without Ron's easygoing nature to balance Harry's intensity, Harry and Hermione were a formidable if somewhat serious pair. The Triwizard Tournament still occurred. Harry's name still came out of the goblet, but the dynamic of the school was different. The Weasleys, still grieving, were less inclined to be overtly hostile towards Harry, though the underlying pain was always present. Cedric Diggory, a kind and honorable Hufflepuff, still participated. Harry, perhaps more attuned to the fragility of life after Ron's death, formed a deeper, more empathetic connection with Cedric. He saw in Cedric a kindred spirit, a good person who deserved to live. The graveyard scene was a horrifying echo of Ron's death. Harry, forced to watch Cedric fall, felt the familiar surge of grief and helplessness. Voldemort's return was just as brutal, just as terrifying. The duel was fought with a renewed, desperate fury by Harry, now twice scarred by loss. The Priori Incantatem still occurred, the echoes of Cedric's parents, and then, startlingly, Ron's parents, appearing as echoes from Voldemort's wand, a ghostly reminder of the pain he had inflicted. Ron's own echo did not appear, as he was not a victim of Voldemort's wand, of a chess game. This second profound loss, Cedric's death, solidified Harry's resolve. He was no longer just fighting for himself, or even for Ron's memory. He was fighting for everyone who had been taken, and for those who still lived in fear. Harry's isolation after Cedric's death was profound, but Hermione was his rock. She was the one who believed him, who stood by him when the Ministry turned its back. Their shared grief over Ron and Cedric, and their unwavering belief in Voldemort's return, bound them tighter than ever. Dumbledore, seeing the immense burden Harry carried, began to reveal more about the prophecy and Voldemort's nature. He understood that Harry, having already faced such profound loss, needed to be fully prepared. Hermione, with her sharp intellect, was often present for these discussions, absorbing every detail, becoming an invaluable strategist and researcher for the nascent Horcrux hunt. The Department of Mysteries battle was still chaotic, but Harry and Hermione fought with a synchronized ferocity. The Order of the Phoenix arrived, but the losses were still keenly felt. Sirius Black's death, though devastating, was perhaps less of a surprise to Harry, who had already witnessed the fragility of life. This loss, however, deepened his resolve to bring down Voldemort, ensuring no one else would suffer. The Horcrux hunt became the central focus. Dumbledore, recognizing Hermione's exceptional intelligence and Harry's intuitive understanding of Voldemort, involved them both deeply. They spent hours in Dumbledore's office, poring over memories, discussing strategies, and piecing together the dark puzzle of Voldemort's soul. Hermione's meticulous notes and research skills were paramount in identifying potential Horcruxes and their hiding places. Dumbledore's death still occurred, a planned sacrifice to weaken Voldemort and set Harry on his final path. Snape still played his part, but the emotional impact on Harry was different. He grieved Dumbledore as a mentor and a father figure, but he also understood the necessity of the sacrifice, a grim echo of Ron's own. The burden of the Horcrux hunt now rested solely on Harry and Hermione's shoulders. Their relationship by this point had blossomed into a quiet, profound love. Without Ron's presence, the unspoken tension and eventual romantic pairing between Harry and Hermione had developed naturally. They were each other's anchor, their comfort, and their strength. They shared a deep understanding that transcended words, a bond forged in the crucible of shared loss and looming war. The decision to leave Hogwarts and hunt Horcruxes was made by Harry and Hermione together. There was no argument, no hesitation. They were a unit, two halves of a whole. There, Dumbledore explained the nature of the Horcrux, the choice Harry had, and the power of love. Harry chose to return, the Horcrux within him destroyed. He returned to the battle, to Hermione, to the fight for a world where such sacrifices would not be in vain. The final duel between Harry and Voldemort was the culmination of years of pain, loss, and unwavering resolve. Harry, now truly free of the Horcrux, fought with a clarity and power he had never fully possessed. Voldemort, weakened and increasingly desperate, was ultimately defeated, his own curse rebounding upon him. The Elder Wand recognized its true master, and Voldemort's reign of terror ended. The war was over. The wizarding world rejoiced, but for Harry and Hermione, the victory was tinged with profound sorrow. They had won, but at an unimaginable cost. They rebuilt their lives together. Their love, forged in fire and grief, deepened with time. They married, their union a quiet testament to enduring loyalty and shared history. They named their first child a son, Ronald, in honor of the boy who had given everything. Harry became an Auror, a quiet, determined leader, forever marked by the losses he had endured. Hermione, a brilliant and compassionate witch, dedicated her life to reforming the Ministry and advocating for the rights of all magical beings. The wizarding world remembered Ron Weasley as a hero, a brave 11-year-old who had laid down his life for his friends and for the greater good. His sacrifice, though heartbreaking, had inadvertently forged a stronger, more resilient Harry Potter and a bond with Hermione that would shape the future of the wizarding world. The path was darker, the losses more keenly felt, but the light of love and courage, ignited by a boy's ultimate sacrifice, had ultimately triumphed. And in the quiet moments, Harry and Hermione would often look at each other, a silent understanding passing between them, a shared memory of a brave, red-headed boy who had changed everything.